The void of space was a liar. It promised silence but delivered screams. It spoke of emptiness but harbored death. Commander Rael Drayce had known this truth for years, yet each time he gazed upon the abyss, he felt its deception anew. Kryn 4 loomed ahead, wreathed in flames, a dying world where thousands of Federation soldiers had already been turned to ash. The planet was nothing but a graveyard now, the air thick with static interference and the fading echoes of distress beacons. Another war-torn husk, another battlefield the Federation's elite forces were sent to reclaim. Though they all knew the truth, there was no reclaiming anything from the Storm Revenant. The briefing had been sparse. It always was when a mission was destined for failure. High Command sent them in as legends and wrote them off as ghosts. The Immortals, they called them. A cruel irony. The elite warriors of the Federation, draped in accolades and paraded before the public as humanity's unstoppable force. But Rael knew better. He had seen the pattern, the slow churn of a military machine that devoured its best warriors in service of an unwinnable war. The Federation needed a myth, not a victory, and myths were built on corpses. The Storm Revenant had appeared from the dark beyond known space, a force of towering warforms and celestial aberrations that bent reality in their wake. No negotiations, no demands, just annihilation. The Federation had thrown fleet after fleet at them, and still, the Revenant carved through entire systems like a cosmic plague. Now Kryn 4 had become their latest hunting ground, and the Federation had sent him to die here. Inside the Vindicator, the bridge crew worked in hushed tones, their faces pale under the flickering emergency lighting. Reports streamed in. Ground. Units had gone dark within hours, orbital defenses torn apart. Ghostly distortions haunted the edges of the scanners, flickering, then gone. That was how it always began. Rael tightened his jaw, fingers brushing against the cold grip of his sidearm. There was no strategy for fighting an enemy that did not obey the rules of war. A hologram sputtered to life before him. Admiral Lorne's, face marred by static. A relic of a man, his voice a weapon sharpened by decades of war. He wasted no time with pleasantries. You and your Immortals are to deploy immediately. Retrieve the package. Priority Omega. The word sent an icy thread down Rael's spine. Priority Omega meant one thing. No survivors were expected. The orders were clear, but Rael had learned to see past them. Something was different this time. Something buried beneath the Admiral's clipped tone, beneath the sanitized phrasing of his orders. The Federation wanted something from Kryn 4. Something they were willing to sacrifice their best for. A cold weight settled in his chest as he turned toward his team, the warriors who had bled beside him in battle after battle. Some had started to believe in their own myth, in the idea that they could beat the Revenant through sheer will alone. Others, like Rael, knew they were already dead men walking. But still, he would fight. Not for the Federation. Not for the war, for the truth. And the truth was waiting for him on the surface of Kryn 4. The Vindicator descended into Kryn 4's lower orbit, its hull battered by the planet's atmosphere, flames licking against the reinforced plating. Below, the surface stretched in jagged ruins and smoldering wreckage, a world already lost. What little had once thrived here had been reduced to skeletal remains, the air heavy with the scent of burning metal and ozone. The cityscapes had collapsed into themselves, monuments of civilization now nothing more than gravestones for the countless lives consumed by the Storm Revenant. Rael Drayce tightened his grip on the Vindicator's drop harness, feeling the faint tremor of the ship's final descent. His squad sat in grim silence, their weapons locked, their helmets obscuring the fleeting looks of doubt beneath their visors. They were the Federation's best, the Immortals, and yet, none of them had faith in the mission. A static-ridden transmission crackled over comms. Ground teams last reported engagement at Sector 17. No further contact. Proceed with caution. No further contact. Same as every other world. The ship buckled as it passed through the dense storm clouds, eerie violet streaks illuminating the horizon. The Storm Revenant's signature anomaly, a distortion in space-time that bent reality itself. The briefing called it a localized quantum event. Rael called it a grave marker. The hatch hissed open, revealing a landscape soaked in unnatural twilight. The squad deployed swiftly, boots sinking into the scorched soil, weapons sweeping for movement. The ruined cityscape loomed ahead, buildings, twisted by forces beyond human comprehension. Silence. Too much silence. They moved through the wreckage, the air thick with static that danced across their armor. Rael scanned the area, but there were no bodies. No Federation corpses, no civilians, only the remains of machines and shattered structures. As if the Revenant didn't kill their enemies, they erased them. Then, the distortion hit, a sharp pressure in the skull. A flicker at the edge of vision. The world skipped. One moment his team was advancing, the next they were meters ahead, their last few steps erased from memory. A soundless pulse rattled the air, and the ruins shifted. Walls that had been intact, a moment before, now bore scorch marks. A distant Federation outpost that had been crumbling was suddenly whole again. Temporal displacement. Rael steadied himself. Stay together. The Revenant were here, watching. And then, the whisper came. Not through comms, not through any known frequency, but inside his mind. You do not belong here. A cold dread settled over him. It was not a warning. It was a statement of fact. The whisper faded, leaving behind an unnatural silence, thick and oppressive. Rael Drayce gritted his teeth, the pressure in his skull pulsing like a second heartbeat. They were being watched, studied. His squad shifted uneasily, their weapons trained on the shifting ruins, but it didn't matter. Conventional. Weapons meant nothing against something that bent the fabric of reality. The static interference grew worse. Their HUDs flickered, vitals spiking erratically. Some of the soldiers muttered prayers, others checked their ammo, as if bullets would stop the Storm Revenant. But Rael had seen too many battlefields to put faith in steel alone. Then, movement. Flicker in the periphery. Something tall, shifting, wrong. Not quite here, not quite there. A silhouette that rippled like a reflection in disturbed water. Then another. And another. The squad opened fire on instinct. Pulse rounds tore into empty air. The figures did not dodge. They merely ceased to exist where the bullet struck, materializing elsewhere in the same impossible motion. No screams, no impact. The Revenant didn't move like men, didn't fight like men. A soldier, Vance, staggered back, his rifle dropping as his helmet's visor fogged over from within. He clawed at it, his breaths turning ragged. They're in my head. His voice cut out, a strangled gasp replacing it. His body went rigid, limbs seizing up. Then, as if some unseen force had claimed him, he simply vanished. Not torn apart, not disintegrated, removed. A chill crawled up Rael's spine. There would be no bodies to bury. Fall back. Regroup at the crash site. His command snapped his team into motion. They ran, boots pounding against the fractured earth. The city twisted around them, shifting like a living thing. Corridors that hadn't existed before opened ahead of them, leading them deeper into the ruins. They were being herded. Another scream cut short. Two more gone. Rael forced himself forward, breath burning in his lungs, refusing to acknowledge the growing absence behind him. He could feel them now, not as physical entities, but as a force, a hunger, a presence that was neither alive nor dead. They reached the remains of an abandoned Federation outpost. The door barely held as they slammed it shut, the bulkheads groaning under unseen pressure. Inside, the emergency lighting flickered, casting deep shadows across a command center lined with inactive consoles and shattered monitors. And then, they found the scientist, slumped against the far wall, a tattered Federation coat barely clinging to his frail frame. Blood smeared the floor beneath him, but it wasn't fresh. It had dried, cracked, yet his chest still rose and fell, alive barely. His eyes snapped open at their approach, wild and desperate. You fools, You don't even know why they're killing you." His voice was hoarse, broken. His fingers trembled as he tried to reach for something unseen. "The war is a lie. You don't fight the Revenant, you stole from them." The words settled like a dead weight in Rael's gut. The Federation hadn't been defending its people. It had provoked something it could never hope to understand. And now they were all paying the price. The scientist's breath rattled in his chest, his eyes bloodshot, pupils blown wide. He reached for Rael, fingers shaking with exhaustion and fear. They don't want to conquer. They don't want to kill. His voice cracked, each word forced through dry, chapped lips. They just want it back. Rael knelt beside him, pressing down on the man's wound. "What did we take?" The scientist's body convulsed as if some unseen force tried to silence him, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Then, in a whisper barely audible over the static ringing in the air, he rasped, "The seed." A shockwave ripped through the outpost, sending Rael and his remaining squadmates sprawling. The walls buckled, the ceiling cracking as dust rained from above. Outside, the sky tore open. Not an explosion, not a bombardment. Something was arriving. Rael pushed himself up, his ears ringing. His squad scrambled to their feet, weapons raised. But what could they fight? What could they shoot when the very fabric of reality was unraveling around them? Then the doors melted away. Not broken, not blasted apart, unmade. And through the void, they stepped. The Storm Revenant were no soldiers, no war machines. They were manifestations of something beyond the Federation's understanding. Their forms flickered, phasing in and out of existence like echoes of something greater. Tall, elongated figures, their bodies composed of shifting energies and fractured, light, humanoid only in silhouette. Their presence alone bent the very air, warping time itself. One of them spoke, though not in words. The voice bypassed Rael's ears entirely, vibrating in the core of his skull. It was never yours to take. Rael's breath hitched. Behind him, the scientist was convulsing, his veins turning black, his body unable to withstand whatever force pressed upon them. His words had been the last defiance before something greater than himself had claimed him. Rael stood, his hands open, his rifle forgotten on the floor. His men flanked him, but none of them fired. They knew it was useless. "The seed," he murmured, barely a question. The Revenant did not move, did not blink, did not breathe. But he felt their response, return it, or be erased. The weight of the ultimatum settled on his shoulders. The Federation's high command had never intended for them to survive this mission. They weren't sent to fight. They were sent to buy time, to delay the inevitable. Rael clenched his fists, fury coiling in his chest. They had lied. Again. Sacrificed lives for their secrets. For power. The seed, whatever it was, wasn't here. That was the final cruelty. The Federation had moved it long ago. The Revenant had wiped out entire fleets looking for it, and the Federation had kept sending their elite soldiers into the slaughter, knowing full well they had nothing to offer but their deaths. His mind spun. They were already dead. Weren't they? Nothing would change that. But he could choose how they died. His comms crackled, and the familiar voice of Admiral Lorne filtered through, cold and detached. "Mission status, Commander?" Rael exhaled slowly. He looked at his men, tired, bloody, staring at him with trust in their eyes, trust the Federation had never earned. He pressed his comm unit. "High Command withheld intel. The seed isn't here. We were sent to die." His voice was eerily calm. "I am declaring High Command compromised. We are standing down." A pause. Then Lorne's voice returned, measured but seething. "Commander, Drayce, you are relieved of duty." Rael smiled, grim and resolute. "Not yet, I'm not." Then turning to the towering Revenant before him, he took the final step forward and said, "I can get you what you want, but not for free." The air hummed, reality itself rippling in response. A choice had been made. And the war had just changed. The silence that followed Rael's words was suffocating. The air itself seemed to tighten, crackling with unseen forces as if the universe itself was pausing to consider his offer. The Storm Revenant did not speak in words, but he felt their answer before it came. A low, resonating hum in the depths of his mind, vibrating in his bones. They were listening. Rael's squad stood frozen, awaiting his next move. He knew what they were thinking. You can't negotiate with monsters. But were the Revenant monsters? Or was the real monstrosity the Federation that had sent them here to die, knowing full well this mission was a lie? His comm crackled to life again, this time not with Admiral Lorne's voice, but something worse. Federation High Command. A voice smooth, calculated, entirely devoid of empathy. Commander Drayce, you will stand down immediately. You have no authority to speak on behalf of the Federation. Rael laughed under his breath, shaking his head. Authority? You sent us here to die. You don't get to decide how we go out. A deep hum reverberated through the ruined city, the very fabric of Kryn 4 trembling under its force. The Revenant were waiting, not patient, not merciful, waiting. He met the alien gaze of the entity before him, its form shifting, neither solid nor light, neither flesh nor energy. There was no hatred in its presence, no malice, only purpose. The Federation stole from you, hid it, used it. I can help you find it. Rael's voice was steady, but the weight of what he was saying burned inside his chest. He was crossing a line he should have never had to cross. And what do you demand in return? The words came not from the Revenant's mouth, but from the space around him. A thought that was not his own yet filled his mind like a foreign pulse of energy. He swallowed hard, glanced at his men, those who had survived, those who had been betrayed. My people, safe. No more massacres, no more war. You get what's yours and you leave humanity alone. A long silence stretched between them. The Storm Revenant did not breathe, did not shift, did not indicate comprehension in any way a human would recognize. And yet, he felt their answer settle into his very soul. If what was stolen is returned, we will depart. If it is not, you will cease. The weight of reality settled upon him, but he stood firm. He had expected nothing less. His comm crackled again, and this time Lorne's voice returned, strained, barely containing the fury beneath the surface. You're making a mistake, Drayce. Rael exhaled slowly, eyes locked onto the alien forms. Before him. Maybe. But not today. No, Admiral. You did. The moment you lied to us. And with that, he switched his comms to full squad-wide transmission. His next words would change everything. We are no longer Federation soldiers. The Immortals don't fight for cowards. We fight for the truth. Behind him, his squad exchanged glances. One by one, they powered down their weapons. A declaration of defiance. A declaration of war. Rael turned back to the Revenant and gave a single nod. Let's end this. The war was over. Not in the way wars should end, with treaties, negotiations, or hard-won victories, but in silence, in a shift so absolute that history itself seemed to tremble under its weight. The Storm Revenant left. Not immediately, not all at once, but gradually, deliberately, unstoppably. The moment the seed was returned, when Rael and his defectors unearthed it from the heart of a classified Federation research facility and surrendered it to the beings who had come for it, the Revenant simply ceased. Their presence faded, like a storm breaking apart, drifting into the black. No final attack. No retaliation. But the damage had been done. The Federation was fractured. Rael Drayce and his squad were officially labeled rogue operatives, traitors to humanity. High Command spun the narrative fast, painting them as cowards, conspirators, sympathizers to an alien force that had wiped out entire systems. They called them ghosts, claiming the Immortals had been lost, executed in the final push against the Revenant. Their names were erased from every database, but Rael knew the truth, and so did the thousands who had begun to question the Federation's lies. Deep in the shadows of known space, far from the controlled territories of the Federation, a new movement was rising. Former soldiers, Exiled scientists, those who had seen through the deception, they were gathering. Rael stood on the bridge of a stolen frigate, watching as ships began to arrive in the hidden sector they now called Sanctuary. A fleet was forming, not for conquest, not for war, but for something far more dangerous. Revelation. The Federation had stolen from the Revenant. But what else had they taken? What other truths had been buried beneath layers of propaganda and control? How many more lies had they told? The whispers of rebellion were turning into a storm of their own. Behind him, his second-in-command, Lynn Voss, stepped forward, arms crossed. "We have incoming transmissions, more defectors, they're asking for orders." Rael exhaled slowly. He wasn't a commander anymore. He wasn't a soldier. He was something else now. A warning, a reckoning, a beginning. He turned to Lynn, a ghost, of a smile playing at his lips. "Tell them, we're just getting started." And beyond the dark reaches of space, unseen, something watched. The Federation had feared the Revenant. They had no idea what was coming next.